Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to one of our panel presentations with the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation. I just want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about us before we get into this exciting panel presentation tonight. So, our mission with the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation is to promote and facilitate through our advocacy the adoption of children and youth in the permanent care of the New Brunswick government. And our vision is that every child or youth in the permanent care of the province finds a permanent family. So if you have any questions about our upcoming program at any time, or if you'd like to connect with one of our coordinators, please go to our website at www.nbadoption.ca. Everything is so user friendly. You're going to love it. It has all the registration links to our programs also, but you'll also see our staff there. And please contact us for anything. We love to help. So without any further ado, I'm so excited for this tonight. Tonight's presentation is Navigating Teen Adoption Together, and it's an adoption love story. So I'd like to introduce Zoe and her mom, Mary Ann. Welcome, guys.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah. I can't wait for this. I love hearing you and Zoe talk
Mhm.
about your journey. So I feel privileged that I'm able to be a facilitator for this. And it's so important to get the word out there about older child adoption. So all your answers are just going to help families realize that they probably have the skill set and the knowledge to actually do this, take that extra jump. So I'm going to dive right into the first question. So, Zoe, can you describe a little bit about how and when you came into care and how you met your mama?
Yep. So I came in care for the first time at 1.5. Um, in between that time, from like 1.5 until 5, I was in and out of foster care. So I would go in care, then go back home with my birth mom, and then go back into care. And I did that transition up until 5. And then at 5, I was reunified back home to my birth mom, and I lived with her until the age of 9. And then at 9, I came back in care for the last time. Um, I came into care because my birth mom um, struggled with mental health challenges and coped by using substances. But also, like, my mom grew up in a time where bipolar was seen as kind of like crazy, and there was a lack of like research and education on it. And her family would often like judge her and didn't really understand how her mental health was impacted. And so I think my mom just leaned on substances to cope with what she was going through. Um, and she also had a difficult upbringing, so that also impacted her ability to parent me. So that's kind of the reason why I came into care. So at 9, I was in my last foster home. My birth mom gave birth to my baby brother, who was immediately placed for adoption. And so learning this, I asked my social worker at the time, like, what is adoption? Very curious. And she basically like told me my little brother is not going to be going into foster care. He's going to be going into a family, and like wouldn't be returning to my birth mom type thing. And I asked if I could have that too. And being so young, you think like a lot of children don't really ask to be adopted, but I just knew with what I went through and the experiences of being in care for so long that my birth mom was just not at a point to be able to parent me long term. And I was just tired of going in and out of the system. And I just really craved what my last foster home provided me. And I wanted that like forever. And I just worried that returning back home to my birth mom, I wouldn't get that experience. So I was really jealous of my biological brother who was going to be adopted. So they started that process because I think at the time, like, there was no real um, opportunity to be reunified with my mom. I think the plan was for me to remain in care long term. So me asking to be adopted kind of started the process faster. And like my social worker was very supportive of that decision. And so at that time they asked you like what a dream home is, and I told them that like to like the pinpoint, like I broke it down like every bullet point of what I wanted in a family, and they found that, and it was absolutely like the worst 9 months of my life. So very traumatic experience there. So what was my dream home became like my nightmare. I was removed from that home after 9 months, so I'm about 11 now. And they told me that I'm gonna go live with this single woman in town. And so after school, they picked me up, and basically at the time they just said like pack whatever you can. I'm gonna pick you up after school, and I'm gonna bring you to meet like your new home. And so we were driving, and I like still remember the day, like we were driving down her street, and I'm just thinking, great, like this is not where I want to be. Like I wanted to live on a farm, okay, not in town. And she was like right in town. I wanted to have a father because I never had a father figure. She was single and didn't have like a partner. So I'm like, okay. Had no other kids. I did really want kind of like siblings, and I wanted to live like on a ranch with horses, and she had dogs. So anyway, like I'm gonna let her like carry on how she kind of met me, because she explains it really a lot better, and it's kind of funny. But the first kind of connection when we met, like it was a funny experience, especially looking back at it now. And yeah, so that's just kind of how like I met Mama.
Great. So Mary Ann, I can't wait to hear your side.
I'm going to step back just a little bit because I always knew I wanted to adopt, just to say that. And I had been in a relationship, we broke up and all of that. I started my first job in Department of Social Development. And so I worked for 13 years with social workers, and single women, older single women couldn't adopt. Sorry, Josie. Anyway, that's the dog. Single women couldn't adopt. And so I put that out of my mind. And then I saw something years later that now they're letting single women adopt. So I went to the Pride program, went through the whole thing. Come to find out, they said, we have no kids to adopt in Fredericton, which I was rather surprised. Wow, well, good for you. So I put it out of my mind. And just to let you know, I'm saying this because sometimes we think life just goes smoothly, and everything should work out well because the department's got a handle on it. Well, I'm in the middle, just finished a meeting at work, and I get a call, and they said, how would you like a little girl? And I said, oh, yeah, okay. They tried to sell it by saying, she's blonde, blue-eyed like you. And I'm thinking, I'm not shopping, around. But anyway, okay. And it was supposed to be a gradual meeting and all this. Well, all that didn't happen. First time I saw her, social worker brought her to the door, and I opened the door, and there's Zoe with her hands like this, and she has this T-shirt that says, I'm perfect, right? And I said, oh, you're perfect. I said, well, I'm not. And she just looks at me like, yeah. And I thought, whoa, she doesn't want to be here, right? So we have our meeting, and she was telling me all the things that she had wanted, her dream home, and I didn't check any of the boxes. And I was starting to feel like the fractured fairy godmother, right? I wasn't your Cinderella fairy godmother. And I said, well, Zoe, sometimes we don't get what we want, we get what we need, right? And I might be the one you need, which she might have been a great disappointment, but that's how we first met.
It's so funny.
I know, I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. And
Like on point too, like so disappointed, like who is this woman? And she thinks she's funny? Like not funny. So not impressed.
oh my goodness. See,
Yeah.
we're only started this, and I'm already like, I understand why we titled it like an adoption love story, because I
Mama,
just love this.
Mama like missed out. Like you forgot to say, like they called you and they said like she's coming the next day.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
So, like she had like no preparation for me. They're like, okay. So
Oh, and when her former home that didn't work, they couldn't, I don't know, I got struck, and it made me very sad. because I'm from a broken family too. So it hit me particularly hard, maybe. Her other failed parents there, they couldn't, it seemed to me they couldn't go fast enough to get her stuff out of their house. It was so sad. They came in with boxes that had cigarette butts in them, right? Like the disrespect, garbage bags, a big tank of 2 goldfish, right? And 2 inches of water. And I had 2 cats or 3 cats, I forget, with a dog. And I'm thinking, oh, if those goldfish survive 1 year, we're going to make it. We're going to make it if I make sure her goldfish don't die, right? Because I think this is her goldfish. And they did. They made more than 1 year.
Yeah, yeah, they had a great life. It's funny that you bring up the goldfish because like that was the only pet I could have being a youth in care, right? Like you weren't allowed to have pets. And so like I grew up with this fish, since I was 9. I brought it like, from my foster home to my adoptive home. And yeah, like mama saw that and she's like an animal lover and like completely traumatized that these fish came in this little thing of water and like they like transitioned into like this like privileged fish life, you know what I mean? Like she got me the best of the best fish tank and like accessories and yeah, like they lived their life the best way that they could. It was incredible.
Well, I know how much when you're going from home to home, or you have to grasp something. It could be your stuffed animal, could be whatever pet you have.
Mhm.
And it needs to be, I think anyone who gets a child, you need to respect that.
Mm.
And you need to cherish that because that's something that's very, it's human-like in a way. It's that bond that after a while, I've seen some foster parents, not all, but almost jealous of that, wanting you to get rid of your dolls, like your former one wanted you to get rid of your dolls and all that stuff. That's to me very cruel. That's something that a child's holding on to till they can trust, other people.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
that's
just
our
think
fish
like,
story.
yes, well, that fish story is so symbolic of what happened with Zoe and her placement there too,
Mm.
right? Like you gave her everything she needed and she flourished. So I
Mm.
love this. And I never heard that story before, so I love it.
Oh,
So Marianne, I'm wondering, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced when Zoe moved in with you, and what strategies seem to work best with building that healthy attachment with her?
Well, I don't know if I never felt a challenge per se. I never saw it that way. I saw it more as I was being rushed. And what I was told would happen didn't happen. And then I felt some 2 social workers, the one working for the placement, the one with Zoe. I felt they were doing a little bit of coercion, trying to make me feel guilty if I didn't accept their way. Then, okay, maybe you shouldn't have her then. There was a coerciveness there, which I don't do well with people trying to manipulate me. So I had to deal with that. And I ended up, making a partnership, if you like, with Zoe's um, foster foster mother from before that bad placement. And we worked together to take time for Zoe to come in to take the time that they said was healthy to take before they rushed everything. So that to me, if that could be called a challenge, I believe. So I felt I immediately had to sort of manage the system, take control of the system. And somehow, surprisingly, I found that by doing that, the social workers backed off some because I believe they interpreted that as, well, then she's acting like a parent. Yeah. And they would say, she's advocating for the child already. So I didn't expect that, but I felt it wasn't fair to Zoe. She just came from a very traumatic situation. And they were going to rush her to me, a stranger. What if she wanted to cry? What if she wanted to be with someone that understood? Well, I wanted her to be with, she had a therapeutic foster placement before, and Phyllis is her name, knew Zoe, right? Understood. So we both agreed it would be good for her to have a little period to heal and gradually get to know me, come over in the weekends, and gradually we went in. So that was the challenge, is sort of like working against the establishment to try and do it the way I think was the healthier way of her coming in. And some of the, I don't know if it's strategies. I felt, because of my experience, because I always wanted to adopt, um, the reason I wanted to adopt was I felt through my experience I had something to give back. If I felt maybe I understand some things other people wouldn't, that might be helpful to a child. And so I wanted to, that was sort of my motivation too. I had it in me and I had to give it. I just felt I had to share that. And so I was more or less myself, in that, like, when Zoe would come up to me after a couple months, like, she came right up to me and she went, "You're ruining my life," right? And in my head, I have a lot of bubble thoughts in my head. And I went, "Gee, I don't know you that long. Give me a few minutes and I'll see what I can do." Right. And then I think I said that part to her. And then she just went, never mind.
No,
So it's not taking her too
no,
serious.
you said the government piece
What?
that you worked for so many years.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay. Oh, yeah. When
I'm
she
like, you
said,
gotta
"You're
tell it the
going
right
to," I
way.
forgot the best part. Yeah. She said, in my mind, I'm thinking, "Oh, yeah, give me a few minutes and I'll see what I can do." But to Zoe, I said, "Well, you're right." So I agreed with her, which is disarming. And I said, "I worked for government for 20 some odd years, and I feel I ruin enough people's lives that way." Right. So I said, "Who else can I ruin?" And I said, "Hey, there must be some kids you could adopt." So I called social service and said, "Do you have a child I can ruin their life?" And they said, "Yes, we do." And I said, "Here you are." And she said, "Never mind."
I remember so well, like we were in Robbie's room, right? Like when that happened, I'm just like, huh, huh, okay. Got it.
Well, sometimes I'm also a reader of, The Art of War,
Yeah.
where when you meet a force like this, so you got a little 11-year-old force coming up against you, it's not going to do any good saying, "No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, you're not. So I disagreed. You're right," and then that just diffused that situation. So that was one strategy of not knowing when not to make it an issue. I think that's important. I think knowing when to have a bit of a sense of humor so that you can help your child see things. Like when you're a foster kid, you've been moved around, your little world is small. But if somebody can help you see it larger outside yourself a little bit for a little while, I think it starts to help put things in perspective. And a lot I kept to myself. I remember one time, Zoe doesn't remember it exactly like this, but I remember one time she was mad at me or something. And she said, "What if I dropped out of school at grade 9, like my birth mom?" And I remember in my head, I thought, "Over my dead body." Right. But I didn't say that. And so we talked about it. And I said, "Well, why do you feel like that?" But boy, little did she know that put me razor pointed, right, on her getting an education. I figured there's no way you're just dropping out like that, because she's very bright. And I kept telling her, you have potential, you have the brains. What a waste if you don't use it. No one can take that away from you. So, we'd have, and then another thing, another strategy was we'd go for a spin. And so we could tell you about all our spins, right? She was my captive, right, in the car. And we go for a spin. And it's amazing how your conversation starts out pretty basic and then things come out. And then you can talk about those things. And I don't know, Zoe, if you want to say one of the things that came up, that I nearly took the ditch. And it helped alleviate, so about the
Yeah, go ahead.
can I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
Zoe said something like the family had her before, the man, the father figure. He was telling the mother, supposed mother, that Zoe should get her, and she's 9 or 10, her legs waxed. I almost took a ditch. And I said, and Zoe said, yeah, I thought that was odd, but she had no one to validate that, right?
Mm.
I said, what else did he say about you? You know, what else did you? And so we had a whole conversation about the lack of propriety in that family too. And then we got on to the thing of where it's not your fault. They were the ones that were the issue. They were not the right couple, or the appropriate couple. On paper, they look like it, but they weren't, because when they broke up, the so-called adoptive mother, in a session with Zoe's counselors, called her a gift from the devil. She was the devil's child.
Mm.
Who says that, right? So these little spins we took, we were able to get to those types of discussions, which I think was healthy.
Mm. Healing.
Yeah, and what you're saying is so relatable because I don't know how many times I've taken my son for a drive. We put on the music, we love the same type of music, the radio station's going, and then he just starts talking. And
Mm.
I just give him that opportunity. And when you say she didn't have anyone to validate her feelings, or like when she's 9 and 10, so you gave her such power and you may not this term strategy, I think it's
Yeah.
because you were natural. That's why the word strategy to you might be a little bit different because you were just going to naturally be a wonderful mom.
Mm.
So, yeah, I
Thank
love
you.
this. Okay, so what qualities did your adoptive mom have? So I'm just going to say mama now. Can I say mama? Because
Mhm.
she was adopted at 15. I don't know if we covered that yet. So, your
She
mama
was
have
with me
that
though from 11.
11.
And there's
Yes.
a reason
Correct.
for
Mm.
may I say what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, of course.
Okay. It wasn't that I didn't want to adopt her. I wanted her to be absolutely sure she wanted to be adopted, because in the first couple of years, her mom kept popping up every now and then and using a lot of, you know, um, devices that maybe made Zoe feel guilty about leaving the family, felt bad, worried about her mom. Her mom would go spinning out of control. Then Zoe would go spinning out of control. And that wasn't, in my mind, the right time for her. I didn't want her to feel forced. So I said, we're going to do it. Adoption's adoption. You're my daughter now. It's just a piece of paper right now. I wasn't legally adopted till I was 17, 18. And it was so I could get across the border to Canada. So it's just a piece of paper, right? So that's the reason for the difference. It wasn't anything other than I absolutely didn't want her to feel coerced into anything.
Just like when I moved in, she didn't want it to be forced. Like she wanted me to like
Mm,
choose the date and choose the time. And so I chose Valentine's. I met her
mm,
in October and I didn't move in until Valentine's of the new
mm,
year. So yeah, super special and just
mm,
It is, and it's amazing. Like you gave her that autonomy,
mm,
right? And really giving especially our older youth, some choice. Like it's
mm.
not like you're taking their power away from them, giving them more power. So I love that you took a moment to explain that. Um, so what did your mama have that you wish every adoptive parent to have, and why did those qualities help you guys with like you living there and feeling so loved and so safe?
like I could go on, like the whole panel could be on that, to be honest with you. Like I look at Mama and I get emotional just like her being here and being part of the panel. So because I just love talking about I'm gonna get emotional, our
Yeah.
story. And like I often tell it by myself, but like having her kind of just it makes it like you can see the connection we have. And I just like I hold Mama so close to my heart. Like
Mm,
I love my kids, but like Mama, like the love I have for Mama is very, very deep and very special.
mm,
Um, so like sorry, I just gotta collect myself here. Holy
Yep.
moly.
Don't you worry. You got me
Love you,
having a
Mama.
few tears.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, so like one thing is like her commitment and willingness to like this adoption and to me. Like Kim, you often say like you have to fall in love with your kid, right? And like I like that's mama. Like she definitely like fell in love in some form, right? Like I felt it from really after like so I didn't feel it at first. So look, I'm just gonna tell this to give it a little bit of breakthrough and make sense of it. But she picked me up one time from Sylvan Learning Center, and it was like a maybe like a month or two in, maybe a month, very fresh. And it was I think she needed some validation too. And basically she had this conversation like, like I'm not your dream home. Like I'm like single and like I have dogs and like, like basically
And
like
you wanted horses.
yeah, like rubbed in like, like I'm not the dream home you want. And it was sounding like a breakup, and I was like,
Mm.
I remember like begging almost like, no, like I love that you have dogs, like I love that you're in town. Like I don't care if you don't have a partner. Like, like I was just dismissing it like all of my what I can't like so-called called a dream, right? And it almost like validated mama, like, okay, like she does want to be with me type thing, right? So it was in that moment that I realized like, okay, like there's commitment here and willingness to kind of move forward type thing. So any type of like challenge or tantrum or outbursts, like mama never like personalized my behavior or like my outbursts or like my dysregulated emotions. Like she was just always willing to like put her feelings to the side and commit to like helping me get through whatever I was going through emotionally, right? Or mentally. So like just never giving up on me and like showing me that she was truly committed to making this work no matter how difficult I was pushing it or saying like I don't want you to be in my life. Like there was a moment where I ran away at like 13, and I ran away to my social worker's office because I didn't know where else to go. But I was like, I'm not going back there. Like this woman's horrid. Like even like accused her of doing things that she didn't do, like I was just painting her as like this really bad negative individual, and I was just not wanting to be around her because I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, and she was trying to keep me accountable to that. So I went into like this crisis unit for a little bit of time where it's like a group home, but more for like specialized behavioral challenge children, which I was not that, but at that time that kind of led me there. And the staff were even like, "What are you doing here? Like, you need to go back home. Like, you're not the type of kid that we kind of get in these homes, right?" But I was adamant not going back. Um, but during that time, and Mama, I don't know how long I was there, like 4 months maybe.
No, not even that
No,
long.
no, like it was not, it was
It
long enough
was,
that I missed home, but not short enough that I felt like it was quick, like,
yeah,
but I just
it was
remember
after
like,
Christmas.
yeah, like I just remember her like showing up, like I was so mean to her during like reflecting on this as an adult. Like I was so mean and like she handled it with grace and
Uh,
like tell them because you tell it better, but like tell them like the paper bag story, like
with
when
the
I told you I was like, can you pick me up for
oh,
basketball?
oh, yes, okay. She told her social worker, but I had her in a lot of things, like at this church, this choir or dance. She was in basketball and all this stuff. She said to her social worker, "Well, I need a drive to go to her dance thing, right?" And the social worker said, "Well, you have a mother, call her, right?" And so um she called me and she's like, "Hi." Like that. And I said, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" She says, "Well, I need a drive to the dance." I said, "Oh, okay." She said, "But well, how'd she say that?
You
But I'm
can't look
sitting
at
in the
me.
back, right?"
No, you
I
can't
said,
look at
"Oh,
me.
what?" Yeah,
I
and you
said,
can't look at me.
yeah.
And I said, "Oh, so I should put a paper bag over your head." No, I said over my head. I said, "No, no, I can't do that because I won't be able to see to drive. So I'll put the paper bag over your head. Then you won't have to see me, right?" And she's like, and then eventually it's like she didn't want to crack that shell,
Yeah.
right, of indifference or anything. But gradually, I'm the type of person that, and I've even had it with some people, I have to make you laugh once. Even if you can give me the hardest person to make laugh, and I will get them to chuckle or something. And then I feel it cracks the facade a bit, and
Mm.
then we can start relating. So that was that
Yeah.
situation.
So like during that time, like going back, like that's just commitment of showing up and like, you know, like taking me to dances and basketball practices, even though I was just like, don't look at me and being difficult, you know. And she even during that time like went to my psychologist's house late at night
Oh,
and like was like, I'm not leaving here until like we create a plan on how I'm gonna get my daughter back. So like extremely just devoted to this. And I think when you're adopting, especially older, like we do come with some challenges because our brain is rewired, you know, like we're born to have a brain wired for connection, but trauma brains are wired for protection, right? So we're like constantly just like quite difficult until we start that healing journey. So yeah, just really appreciate that quality in her. Humor, as mama touched, you know, like she just always found the best like kind of responses to my little dramatic tantrums, and like never feeding into them, you know. Like I think when you feed into them or personalize them, that's when like there's like a wall and it creates like a more negative energy that's not needed, and it just creates like a bigger issue and challenge, and it's not healing, you know. Like that's not a trauma response type thing if you're not finding a way to, you know, not personalize that behavior. You really, like when you're working with traumatic children, you really have to put your feelings and emotions to the side on that. So she was really great at that. And again, she shared some humorous ways of you know, navigating my challenges. Her patience and advocacy, mama's very patient, you know. For the most part, like there are some triggers. I know her triggers. Education was one. Like I could come home and like I was pregnant at 17, and like when I told mom I was pregnant, she was like chill and like, you know, like what are we going to do about that? Like what's your plan? Like, you know, supportive. But then when I came home and told her like I failed a science test, it was like she was going back and forth the wall being like, "What?" or like, "Why?" Like, you know, like that was a trigger for her because she really wanted me to excel and do well in school because mama just values education.
and
So
the injustice of that science test.
yeah. So like even the education system is like a challenge in itself, and mama was such a good advocate during that time for me, you know. Like a lot of teachers like were like almost working against me and like wanted to put like that I was like had a learning disability, and mama just didn't accept that, you know. Like language and how you like word things are so important, especially for young people's identity. So like instead of saying I have a learning disability, mama's like, no, like she has educational gaps. Like this is a child who's been in and out of the care system, unable to really focus on education because that's not a priority. Like she's surviving what she's going through. So she has gaps in her education, which impacts her ability to be able to take some information in. So like we need to work alongside of her and support her versus like putting a label on her, you know? So she was really quick to just advocate for me on that and like found resources to strengthen my knowledge. And, you know, like I wouldn't be who I am today without her, like, yeah, her advocacy and devotion to like bettering me as a child and as a human, you know. Like she really put a lot of work and dedication to healing me and helping me become the person that I was supposed to. And like
Oh,
another main thing, like I forgot to say, is like switching and challenging my thinking. So this is really huge because we come with like a very negative lens, you know, like very low confidence, a lot of self-blame. Like if I got in a fight with a friend, like I'd often be like, it's my fault. Like it's my fault. And mom would be like, no, like it's not your fault. Like this is my perspective on it. Cause like she would hear the whole story and like challenge my way of like looking at a situation. And I'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. Like it isn't always my fault, you know, or I, you know, wanted to drop out or I wasn't smart enough. Like she was just always finding ways to challenge my thinking and give me a different perspective, which is so important when you're working with this population.
Marianne, I love these wonderful qualities about you.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Um,
I'm honored to hear her say that because when you're doing it, you know, you're hoping that you're helping, right? That you're I am one that doesn't like unfairness or injustice. And I knew being a foster child, there was stigma to it. People immediately, school systems, anyone, it's their fault. And I even had one of her friend's mothers try to blame Zoe for something. It was her own daughter because she was everybody will believe it's a foster kid, right? And that really made me vocal, about, I tried immediately to say to Zoe, you're not a foster child anymore, because I believe it's important to change the language. I said, you're going to be adopted child. You're going to be my daughter. You don't talk about foster anymore. You're not that. And I also realized for a child coming from the system, it's a big leap, a socioeconomic leap that they may not be prepared for. I mean, something Phyllis said to me is like when Zoe had said, oh, we can get clothes from Walmart for me, So I went maybe the other way. I'd go to Winners and get a real nice stuff that the kids that may have been saying, you're a foster kid, blah, 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 were now like, oh, gee, where'd you get that? Right? Like she needed something to barter with the kids that didn't have any trauma or bad relationship. I see that, like my grandson, the middle child, he's 6 years old, a little younger than his older brother. He needed some toys that he could barter to get his brother to play with them, right? So I see that. So yeah, I'm glad to see that. I think it helped, Zoe, give her a language to recreate herself. She was always that, because the first time I saw her in the porch, I've told her this, I saw a spark, right? And that spark, I don't know what it was, but I knew she could do whatever she wanted. Right from the first moment I saw her.
I think the same thing. I know Zoe so well, and I think she's absolutely special. I'm going to go to another question, and then I'm going to take a break to see if we have any comments or questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what strengths and skills do you feel should be focused on while children are in care, Zoe? And why would those be so important to their future relationships, including when they're looking at employment or personal relationships?
Yeah, I thought this was like a big question. I'm like, oh, how do I answer that? But like to me, like when I look at it and like connecting it to my adoption, it's like mama really focused on my strengths, just that in itself, like bringing that to life, like what could be seen as something negative, like my dramatic, dysregulated emotions. Mama looked at that as like, ooh, little strength there. I'm gonna put you in acting school. You're gonna excel. I can see it, like, and I did, and I enjoyed acting. So what people could have, put a label on very behavioral challenging and dysregulated emotions, mama looked at it as like, a strength, and bringing that to life, and putting me in a resource that could strengthen that strength that I didn't know I had. So and she did that a lot. She looked at what I was, again, I came with a very negative outlook, like almost like my family paved the way for my future, and there's no way that I'm going to have anything different than what my birth family has done with their life, like, and mama just really was like, no, she saw qualities and saw things in me that I didn't even know existed, or, I had, and really brought that to life. So that really helped me, gain a bit more confidence, worked on my self-esteem, my worth. Um, so yeah, that's like one major thing when you're working with kids in care, is finding their strengths and building on that and showing them like, you've gone through things, but those things that you've gone through can turn into opportunities, and like opportunities to like change the world, to change perspectives. And um yeah, like mama just looked at me as well and like saw that, I didn't have a voice and I didn't know how to advocate for myself. So teaching me that and showing me, my rights as a human, and validating my experiences, like that's so important when you're working with this population, because again, we don't get a lot of validation. We don't really know what normal is if it's not chaos, we kind of like, and that's kind of what creates that intergenerational cycle, is not being able to heal and going to that chaos, and finding ways to, stay in that, because that's what all we're known for, like that's all we know and what we're comfortable with. So really challenging like what a healing environment can look like and what it can do for your well-being, right? So I think that's really important as well. And mama really excelled on that and put me in a lot of opportunities to tell my story. And, sometimes it's not just therapy that is a way of healing, right? Like it's having an opportunity to share your voice. Like when I went and did a lot of that advocacy work, I had people validating me after and being like, can't believe you went through that. Like your journey is so, you've been through a lot, and like validated what I went through, and that's helps, and I think those are really important things, is giving opportunities to young people to use their voice and know what their rights are.
And everything you're saying there is all really transfers into every part and every aspect of someone's life. So whether
Mm,
it's personal relationships, whether it's employment, having that voice, knowing your strengths. So everything you just said there is like
yeah.
absolutely wonderful for a child to go forward in life to have.
And
So
like working with this population, because I work in this population, it's like I have to challenge the young people I work with too, because they just have this negative outlook that they're going to go nowhere in life. And it's like, I think seeing some of the network members that have really taken their life and have done well, those are great mentors to have and to have in young people's lives, like the younger generation that are coming into care, because it kind of shows them, you can go through all this, but you can come out of it and like really turn your life around, right? It's like,
exactly.
the match analogy where it's like all the matches are burning, but that one
Yes.
match like kind of brings it down and like breaks like that generation. Like that is my goal as a human and as a mother, is like I don't want trauma, really like deep rooted trauma, to exist when it
Yeah.
stops with
Well,
me.
it's a wonderful dream, and I hope you're doing everything you can to succeed in that. So I'm going to go to Jessica there for a moment. And Jess, could you tell me if we have any comments or questions before we go on to our next question?
Yeah, so definitely. We have a lot of comments about saying how much they love your story and how this is the best, especially when you talking about some of those funnier moments, lots of heart. So we're flying on my screen. So some really great messages there. Um, you have the driving piece and the idea of taking kids for drive was a really big thing in our comments. And quiet reflection spots and going to sit and talk. Robert Melanson has a question for Zoe. Was there an event or a situation that helped you feel secure in your relationship with Mama?
Yeah, that's my aunt. God love her. Like she's awesome, and like
Hi.
look at her as like a second mother type thing, like mother figure. She's very important and part of our journey as well. But that's a great question. I would say for me, it was that time that I went into that crisis unit. Like that was a pivotal moment for our relationship. Like when I came back home, um, and mama, like, I don't know, you can speak on this too. Like I felt like our relationship was able to move forward, and like we really, it was like, okay, we got through the testing phase, and like I really was able to recognize mama's commitment to me there, and I'm like, okay, like she's not giving up, like this woman is determined. And you know I love her and I want to be around her. Like I enjoy mama. Like that's another thing. Like you have to fall in love with the child, but the child also has to fall in love with you, like like I said, like I hold mama so very close to my heart. Like sometimes like she doesn't like when I talk about it, but like I get emotional like thinking of the day like she's no longer here, right? Like she's taught me everything in this life except for how to live without her. So she's just such a special, special human.
Oh,
Oh,
thank
thank
you.
you.
So Jess, I'll come back to you at another time and see if we have any more, okay? I'm gonna move on to our next question, which is for Marianne. Um, Marianne, what was your prior experience with children from care before meeting Zoe? And did you believe that you felt you had the knowledge and experience to parent a child with trauma? If not, what suggestions would you tell waiting families to do to make themselves more prepared for older child adoptions?
That's an interesting question for me.
Mm.
Um, as I said earlier, I did come from a broken family. So the experience, children from care, more or less my birth family, everybody was in every form: adoption, orphanage, foster care. I was private placement and living with the parents. So we had an experience of every type of separation type placement. There was that, and I felt that I had something to give. And I want to give a little credit to we've got my adopted mother, who I always considered to be my mother. I mean, that woman was like a child psychologist. And we're talking decades ago. She was so, I don't know, good at, at 7 years old, I challenged her. She made one or two slips because she was, we're human, right? And she said something like, I think she was thinking that maybe I should have been a little more appreciative, right? And I'm 7, and she says, well, we did take you in. That's one time only she said that. And in my little head, right, I'm thinking, no, this isn't going to work. This isn't 50-50. I'm out of here, right? And I said to her, and this is where her greatness is. Not many people would accept that from a child, right? I said something like, just 1 minute. You waited 13 years to have a child, right? And I'm a good kid, right? And I said, and I needed a home, and I decided you'd make good parents, right? And she said, but the fact that she was open, she said, oh, and she apologized. She said, she hadn't thought that the child just makes a decision too in this relationship. They decide, I mean, I had been evaluating them, right, for all this time. And I decided they passed. So I'd stay. For some reason, it was my decision. And I think a lot of people have to sort of appreciate that, right? But what I wanted to say is I got a good experience from her too, about how you don't have to say, oh, don't talk, don't get, you know what I mean? She was open enough to say, to accept my perspective. So I think that experience helped me. Another thing is, I've dealt with my own trauma. So I believe that that might have been some help to be familiar with that type of broken family type trauma, and worse. I don't think, though, you have to have all that. That's what I would say to prospective, adoptive parents. You don't have to have my experience or that. You can easily read about trauma. You could surround yourself with people who maybe, like some social workers or conferences or podcasts like this, where you can hear other people speak about it, and allow yourself to open your mind to more than just what you're used to. I don't want to say normal, because I think we all have a little bit of trauma in our lives. But what was considered normal, you have to open yourself up more, and you have to realize you're dealing with a human being who has their own perspectives on things. So with Zoe, seeing Zoe's perspectives opened my mind quite a bit. And I like to think maybe sharing some of my perspective maybe got her to see, well, if she could do it, maybe I could do it. So you have to also share your ups and downs. You don't have to be the perfect parent. You can say all your mishaps and hurts and all of that. And then the child can, embrace that and see they don't have to try to be the perfect child. Because I know how it is. You want to not make a misstep, because here you are and this family's accepted you, and you certainly don't want to be kicked out. Right. So you try, and you don't want the child that's like that, worrying about that all the time. So you share your experiences, and they can see, okay, they're going to accept me. If they're like that and they share that with me, maybe they'll accept me and my mistakes, and when I fall down. So that's what I would tell people to don't try to be the perfect parent. Be open to learn about many different things maybe you never thought you'd learn about, like trauma recovery and things like that. You can read about it. You can listen to podcasts. You can listen to people speaking of their experience. I think that would help you. Just be open-minded.
And it's so true, right? Like the fact that you're saying that people don't have to have your experience, where your experience was so relatable, to what some of Zoe's journey,
Mm.
right? So, but people who haven't had that experience, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a great adoptive parent, right?
No,
There's lots of other resources, like in Marianne has named three, four of them. Um, there's a lot out there. We can help teach you, join NBAF, right? And come and talk to pre-adoptive and post-adoptive families, kinship caregivers, foster families. We have it all here. So thank you so much for that, Marianne. So this one is for both of you. So support systems. We know they're so important for adoptive parents and the adopted child. What were your support systems like during the time that you're going through this adoption journey? So Zoe, did you want to start or did you want your mama to start?
Mine's short. Like I didn't have
Okay.
a
Yep.
whole lot. Like I think mama brought in the supports really, but my support during this transition was my foster mom, Phyllis. Like she provided me that, that little bit of interim period of transitioning into mama's home, right? And like um just like supported my adoption, my first adoption. And when so I would go to her house after school still to because they didn't change schools right away when I went into that first adoptive home. And I would cry to her a lot, of how unhappy I was. So she was advocating behind. And like I just think um that shows her support towards me too. Like she really wanted what was in my best interest. And so she when I met mama, she and even now she will speak nothing but great and honest words about mama and just thinks like we're the perfect match. And she did. I remember she looked at me and she's like, "Don't mess this up," like I know like she wasn't actually, but she was just like, she's a good woman, like um so yeah, Phyllis just was so supportive of our relationship and continues to be, right? Like we go and visit her and have kept Phyllis really close to our hearts. So she was my main support during this time.
Wow. And Marianne, who did you have as your support system?
well, I do have Rebelt on the list here. I recruited people. I felt
Oh,
I don't have family around me, so I think I'll recruit some people. And I remember going to Rebel, and she's also single, right? And was the art teacher at the school that Zoe was at. And I said, and she was a friend of mine. She is a friend of mine. And I said, how would you like to be an aunt? And she said, uh, yeah, okay. I don't know if, she
I
knew
can
the
see her
whole
saying that
implications,
now
but,
too.
and I said, and then she said, well, what do and I think she had to find her way at what it is to be an aunt. And so I recruited her, my family in Moncton, anybody that I would, like, for example, for the acting, anyone that I knew around me, I would pick them to be the resource. Like for Zoe being so dramatic, and I felt, well, she's preteen, it's only going to get more dramatic, right? And so I was thinking, acting, and I knew someone who had volunteered for, the what do we call NB Theater New Brunswick. So then that's why I linked up there. So I just pulled in resources as best I could. For school, for example, I was always talking to the vice principal and principal. I found there were some teachers. It's amazing how it really makes you become more of an adult. Because I found some teachers didn't appreciate what it was like having children from broken homes very much. And they would take things personally and alienate from the child. Like there was one math teacher that took things personally from Zoe's attitude or I don't know, maybe they just clashed, but I remember I went in there with articles sent it to the vice principal. I can't tell you how many articles on education and the foster child that I sent to them. And then that teacher,
That was
that teacher
spicy.
had his eyes open a bit and he really made an effort. Okay, now it was awkward, but he made an effort. He started telling Zoe these jokes, really dumb. And Zoe was saying, what is he doing? I said, he's trying to
yes.
make that effort, right? It's not to to get
Mhm.
closer and understand you. And she said, they're so corny. Why is he always making jokes? You know, so I would do that, right? I would give reading material to people. I would, like when Zoe was in the crisis unit, I had to sometimes, because she ran away, sometimes the police were involved.
She had a
And
good connection with them.
yeah. And so I didn't like, it's like Department of Education, they're not used to foster kids. So you have to sort of educate them. I found that the police department, you had to educate them. It's like everybody you're going to, you had to educate people. And I went in this one time, I was told to bring this little piece of paper to the police at the shift change at 7 o'clock at night. So Rebel went with me. I was tired because of, Zoe was in crisis unit. I was all emotional about this. And so I go in my little piece of paper and they said, wait for the duty sergeant. And here comes Randy Riley, Sergeant Riley. And I said the name and I stand behind it. Anyway, he's like 6'6". And he says, yeah, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I was told, you know how you are. I was told to bring this paper. Who told you? I felt like if I didn't remember the person's name, he wouldn't believe me, right? I said, well, I don't know. Ask the roster person over there who was on duty yesterday. And so and then I started explaining a little. I have a child, she's in my care because you have to say that right before you adopt. And I said, I have the papers to prove it, she's in foster care. And he comes down from his 6'6" right to my face and points at me and says, what in the hell are you doing to yourself? He says, I've pulled foster kids out of dumpsters. And I know there was, and so I looked at him right in the eye and I pointed back at him and I said, I didn't ask your opinion. Right. And afterwards, it about said he did have a gun. But I'm thinking, I'm not the enemy. It dispersed, if you like. He said, oh, let's sit down over here. So I feel you seek resources, but sometimes you've got to educate the resources too. They're not all willing resources.
Seems like, I know.
Yep.
Yeah.
They don't realize the resources. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So you have to help them see their potential as resources. So that's one thing I would say. I also, it hurt me to see this, but there are some people that are, I'll call them smoochers. They're the ones that befriended Zoe when she was foster child, but only because they were earning points for heaven, I think. Because as soon as Zoe was going to be adopted, they dropped her like a hot potato. And there was one of her friends who said, well, I'm not going to be your friend anymore because you don't need me.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm like, well, Zoe, we got to work with this here. That's more their problem. So that was a resource at one time. So you have to learn. Sometimes you outgrow those resources and supports, right? They're not always there for you. And I had that person's mother call me, oh, so patronizing. Anytime you and Zoe need us, we're here for you. And I thought, well, thanks, but no thanks. Like, it was so condescending. It was like Zoe was their mission, to get into heaven. And I felt we don't need that anymore. Zoe's going to be fine on her own. If you want to be her friend, just to be her friend and you have something, that's different. So I think that's another thing we had to learn. Some people that are supports aren't going to be there forever. They're not going to be the support you need throughout life.
Yeah. And you're so right with that. Even in our support groups, we ask people, like, when you adopt, even social development looks at what support groups and what support systems you have. And we say at least half of that will disappear. Like, within the first year, or when the adoption, becomes more difficult and you need more support, people tend to back away because they don't feel sometimes able to help you in the ways that you need help. And what you're talking about with your support system, Marianne, is so relatable because, like, I'm a military wife. I don't have family around me either.
Mm,
So leaning on people that, and I did the exact same thing.
mm,
My best friends became Connor's aunt, right?
mm,
And uncle. So, which of course in adoption, kinship, every placement, you don't have to be blood to be family. We all know
mm.
that already, right? So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, oh, okay. I just got notification that we have quite a few questions and important comments in the chat. So we still have, I'm going to go to number 7 here. We have only 3 questions left here. I'm going to try and get through 1 or 2 of these and then we'll go to the chat, okay?
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, actually, Marianne, you really already touched on this, which is about the advocacy that was needed
Mhm.
on your part, like to do for in schools and social workers, etc. Do you feel you have anything else to add to that?
I have something, but I don't think it's quite advocacy, but it's a point Zoe mentioned. If I may just sneak it in here very
Absolutely.
quickly. Like I felt too when and maybe this is part of the advocacy, I don't know, but I think maybe not every adoption has this moment. But I felt that at least I think ours did, Zoe and me, where you almost there's that one little moment where you may say, is she the right mother? Or you say,
Mm.
am I doing the right thing? And it's like a nanosecond. But if you get to that point, and then like me, I said, oh, damn it. Yes, this is going to work. You know, come hell or high water, this is working. And here she was, you know, sort of pushing against it because she was mad and everything. But I said, yes, I am. And that's when, like Zoe mentioned, I went to her counselor. Well, okay, I'll be honest. I'm usually very rational. I think, irrational when I went at 8:30 at night. Okay. The woman probably could have had called the police on me. I'm knocking on the door because I'm the way the social workers who now have control of Zoe were talking. I didn't think I'd get her back. So that pivotal moment of thinking you're not getting your child back is the moment it's like you birth the child and it's your child. Do you know? It's a little
Yeah.
bit hard to explain.
Mm.
I
No,
knew
I
and
totally
I
get it.
wanted her back. And I'm knocking on that door at 8:30 at night.
Yeah.
I told her I'm not leaving here until we get this all sorted out, how I'm getting her back. And luckily, she invited me in. We did this. So, yes, I went a little crazy, I think, there, but it's because now I wanted my child back
Mm.
and there was a
She
risk
was
not to. And I think,
so supportive too. Like she was a great psychologist. Like you
yeah,
don't find people really like her. Like if you met her, you would get that like why mama was like somewhat comfortable doing that. Um like you talk about supportive people helping. I forgot I like totally like missed, Anne Shannon. Yeah, she was great. Like such a good psychologist.
Oh,
yeah. And it was
wonderful.
at that moment, I just wanted to say, I think Zoe had that spark moment. I had that spark moment, and that helped us, as Zoe said, push ahead, make a leap ahead.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to stick that in there.
I had my spark moment too, so I love
Oh,
that.
good. Do you
Don't,
want to
yes,
share
I
it?
have. Oh, I don't know if I have time to tell it. Very quickly, I was listening to a song in a bathtub and I started to bawl. And I was like, what is the matter? Like, I'm not a big crier anyway. I'm a softie, but I'm not a big crier. And I was sitting and I started to listen to the words. And I just was like, I love him. I know I love him. And I just started like, and that was my pivotal moment where I fell in love with my child, right?
Yep.
So, and ever since, I'm a fierce advocate. So, I'm going to go right to Jessica. So, Jessica, do you want to pick the top couple of questions? And maybe if we can, we'll try and keep the answers at 2 to 3 minutes each, just because we have 2 more questions to end with later. So,
Mama's a
go ahead,
talk.
Jessica.
That's for you,
Yeah.
Mama.
So this one is sorry for you, Zoe. It says how did you work together to get through your fight responses to attachment, and what aspects of Mama made you feel safe or unsafe?
Oh, these are really good questions. I'm a reflector too, so sometimes I'm not great at like on the spot questions. But I think it was just her like overall like aura. You know what I mean? Like she's just like a very calm, neutral, doesn't like not demonstrative in emotions, you know, like that really helps. Like her aura is just naturally calming and naturally safe, you know. Rarely do you meet those type of people, at least in my opinion. And I just felt that with her. Like I felt very like at the very beginning, even though I wasn't a big fan of her, I felt safe with her. And I think it's just how she presented and yeah, just her energy. Like when you're a child in care, you're an energy reader. Not all, but like I got that. Like that was one of the things I got from being in care was I soak up energy. Like I tell my son like I'm not a mind reader, but I'm an energy reader and I can tell when you're off, you know? And so I think like that's one thing that I was able to do with Mama was just I like sensed her energy and how she was. Um, and I think the other question part was like, how did she fight, like work with my, I forget the other part because that was,
Your fight responses to the attachment. So those moments that you were fighting back,
yeah.
how did you
Again,
work
like
together?
just not personalizing it, like really allowing me to like set the pace. Like she was, again, not just demonstrative, like wasn't forcing anything. Like I didn't call her mama right away. Like I called her her name and very annoyingly sometimes too. Like thrived off of being like Mary like that. Like just so so like just that in itself, like she didn't that didn't matter to her. And like when I did come up with the name, like you could tell that was a little bit of a bonding moment too. And it was like a thing for me. Like I heard my friend call her mom mama, and I'm like, I like it. That's Marianne's name now. I'm calling her mama because I just mom never had a good meaning to me, and I thought like mama doesn't deserve to have the mom title because she didn't put me through what moms did. So I needed to give her a different name because she gave me a different experience, which was super positive, and I didn't want to relate to that. So
Wonderful.
yeah, like those, yeah, just diffusing and humor, like all that. I feel like we kind of answered a little bit of that question, but yeah, she was just again, just not personalizing it, humoring, finding a way to diffuse a situation, agreeing with me even when she probably didn't, you know, like sometimes it's just easy to be like, yeah, you're right. Like, okay, pick and choose your fight battles, right?
Mm.
Yes. Do you have another question, Jess?
Yeah, one from Mary Ann. So some of it you already touched on, but what advice would you give someone who was feeling as though the system was pushing something that maybe they weren't ready for? Like, how did you know what to advocate for?
Well, in the beginning, as I was saying, how I felt they were trying to rush it, and it was rushing it in a way that was against what they said was the best way of doing it, which was surprising. Um, I felt you can't let yourself be intimidated by the system.
Mm,
I mean, there's social workers who their goal is to do good, right? And if you stand up to what you think is not going well or isn't good for your particular situation, your child's, you have to be a bit stubborn about it, I
mm,
found. You have to, and sometimes you have to seek out some, again, we say supports. I was fortunate in one way to um, on my side have the two social workers that worked with us. I ended up getting to know their former supervisor. And I was able to run some things by them. Like, so I had a social worker I could run things by, like, am I going too far? But once I got that, no, that's fine. You couldn't stop me. I would go through anything, like going to the counselor. There was nothing to stop me. I said, and with Phyllis's support, so get some support around you, and then don't give up. Be stubborn. Don't be intimidated by the system. The system can look very scary, can look very intimidating, but no, this is like you saying, give me my child. So it's you against this group of people. That's sort of slowing down you getting your child. So what would you do even if it was your birth child? You would be fighting tooth and nails. And so that's what I would suggest. Don't get intimidated.
Wonderful.
I have one comment that I just want to read. It's not a question, it's just a comment. It's from Brittany. And she says, though this isn't a question, but I just wanted to say, you spoke at the panel when I took pride. I have listened to you speak multiple times on your journey, and I love hearing your story. Now, here I am 5 years into this journey, and I have adopted two older children, and I am their mama. Same as you, it took time, but to them, I am mama, not mom.
Oh
That's
Oh,
my
sweet. I
goodness.
love that.
I
That's
know that
why
brought,
we do this, right? This is why we do it.
brought tears to my eyes. Oh my goodness. Um,
I love that.
okay. My goodness. Okay.
actually, if I may say, Zoe called me Mama Goosey, and I
Yeah.
called her Baby Goosey,
Yeah,
just to add to the.
it's true. Yeah, my mama goose.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have two questions left here, and then I'll go back to Jessica just as she can fill us in on, how many hearts and how many, if there's any other comments. So one's for Zoe and one's for Marianne. And Zoe, if you could go back to when you're a teenager, what would you tell yourself? Any last advice for youth who are currently in care and for youth that have been placed into their adoptive homes?
The advice I would tell my younger self is to do exactly what you do because you learned a lot. No, I'm just joking. I wouldn't change a whole lot, to be honest with you, because I think it really did create the relationship we had, and the outcome is quite positive. But I think I would just tell myself to trust the process a bit more, and it's okay to put your guard down, but at the same time saying that it's only natural to have that with the experiences I had. So, but like, yeah, just trusting the process a bit more. I think with my experiences, I really, again, was negative and didn't have a lot of hope um for it to working out. So, yeah, just, and maybe like not fighting back, like don't be so mean to her. Like thinking back of how some of the things I would say or do, like if my kiddos did that to me, I'm not sure how, if I would handle it as gracefully and as, supportive and loving as mama. I mean, I'm hoping I would because she was a great mentor, but at the same time it's like I was really mean, and I don't like that sometimes. Like when I get in, if I think about it too much, like it gets me sad because like I just don't ever want to be mean to her.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah.
And then what
That's
I would give the advice for others, the adoptees particularly, is like give your adoptive family a chance. I think sometimes we are quick to also give in and like not wanting to make it work. It really does take time to build that rapport and that trust. Like me and mama, it didn't happen overnight. Like I met her at 11. She didn't adopt me fully till 15, but even as a 32-year-old now, like me and mama's relationship is like we still navigate it, right? Because
Hmm.
it's like an ever growing thing. Like there are things like we still hit some bumps and challenges, and we always find a way to work through it. And like still as a 32-year-old and being with her for 21 years, which is crazy to me. Um Sometimes I do sometimes get insecure that I'm like, is this the fight that's gonna break us up? Like you do fear a little bit, like like it's like it doesn't come often, but when we do have those real heated arguments that again don't happen often, I do think like, did I hurt her too bad and she's not gonna come back? Is she gonna answer my phone calls? Because like that's the thing with mama, like majorly is like attachment. Like we have attachment challenges. And like sometimes I call her, like I'll be leaving her house from work to pick my kids up because she watches my kiddos. And like I call her, she makes a joke now, like within the 10 minutes, I'm calling her. Like I call her so much. She's my favorite person to talk to. Like if I have the most minuscule little thing that I want to like I want to tell her everything, I'll call her, and she picks up. She just picks up and she just, like she's just always down for a good chat. And yeah, you just really you gotta be just as devoted and committed to making it work just as much as the adoptive parents.
Love
Yeah,
that.
well
Great
said.
advice. And I love that you're talking about giving it time and that you're going to hit those rocky patches. So forgive yourself,
Yeah.
forgive the adoptive family and work on it going forward. Don't give up,
Yeah.
right?
Like no matter
Um,
the age, like even when you're 50,
yes.
like it's gonna be an ever, like any relationship, even birth
Yes.
family, like they have arguments, right? So it's just like navigating and committing.
Yeah.
Our toughest,
So,
if I may say, our toughest little, I don't get angry very often, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not, because where's my boundary, right?
Mm.
But it would be when Zoe was in university or high school, it would be the beginning of the year. You could guarantee on it. There'd be a spot where she wanted me to help her with some stuff. I'd be helping, and she'd say, "That's it. I can't do it. That's it. I'm quitting. No more, no more." And it would go. And in the beginning, I used to try and talk her down, and it got to the point where she and I were both like this, and I said, I just got to go for a drive. I have to absent myself from here, and then I come back, and then we get back to working together. Well, year 3 of her BA, I was waiting because it happens every, October or so. And we get into November, December. I said, well, what happened? You didn't have that outburst, and I didn't have to go take a drive. What happened? Right? And so those are little things like that we can laugh about now, right?
Yeah.
But there was a point where I did have to catch get my bearings back, and
Mm.
then come back
yeah.
in.
Yeah, sometimes you
No.
just have to remove yourself from the situation. Sometimes you can't diffuse it. Time
Hmm.
needs to diffuse it.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. And the last question I have for tonight, and then we'll go to Jess to see about any comments. Marianne, as an adoptive parent, what advice would you give to waiting parents, and specifically to those who are looking at adopting older children?
They haven't adopted yet, or there is that okay? Yes. If you're working with the system, I would say that, and you've done everything they've wanted you to do, I would say keeping in contact with the let's say the department, um, being part of this so that your people are familiar with who you are and that you're interested and that you want to do that. Um, Talking to people, but also as you're getting closer, I think you need to while you're it's a good waiting time too. Don't waste your time. Think Try to think to yourself, how would it be? It's a good practice time. How would you be with a child that's been traumatized, that's had different broken family and all of that? And I like to say to cultivate an attitude of looking for the positive. I've seen too many foster parents even come up to me, or some adoptive parents, pointing out the negative of the child they have. And look, they do that. Look, they do that. As opposed to looking for the positive in the child and taking that to develop. So this is a good time to practice that, to read more about how you can have the child and make the child grow positively, not focus on all their trauma, the negative things that came with this baggage and all that. So in a way, while you're waiting, don't waste your time. You can do that. Another thing, prepare yourself. Someone told me this. I think maybe it was a social worker, and you think you know it until it happens, right? You will be tested. So while you're waiting for a child, just prepare yourself that you may be tested in a way that you never even knew this was your Achilles heel, but the child will know it. And it's not unusual. Don't be surprised. Why would a child believe you're going to keep them and treat them as their natural child? No one else has till now.
Right.
So, of course, you have to pass the ultimate test. Are you going to give me away now that I've done this? Or are you going to treat me like your own born child? Keep me through thick and thin. And that passes quickly. It doesn't mean it's not opening the door to a terrible life. It's a test that you have to prepare yourself for. So I would just say, if you don't have the child now, you can certainly not waste your time by doing some of this.
Wonderful advice. Absolutely wonderful. Um, Jessica, do you have any feedback that you'd like to add?
Just another lovely comment from your adoptive aunt. She says that as Zoe's adoptive aunt, it took me a while to figure out my role and placement in this relationship. Throughout this relationship, I have learned and have grown a lot as a human being, and I am so grateful for this.
Yeah.
Oh,
She's special. She was very close to our adoption journey and like was a very supportive person to mama and to myself. I again wasn't crazy about her as an art teacher, like me and Taunt had our navigation periods as well, like she almost failed me in grade 6 art. Okay, like I'm like, who fails grade 6 art, but she was serious, like she was keeping me accountable, and then by the time grade 7 I was doing a little better, in grade 8 I finally got that A. But yeah, like I remember she would call, like mama would share, but she would call and complain about me, and I'd go home and complain about her, and then
Can I
eventually,
just, when you finish,
eventually we just like we found like, our connection. Like I often would like look after her after like look for her after school and hang out with her, and we bonded, like we had our own little moments, and Taunt's very special. I just love her.
she is, well, and it was difficult and challenging to navigate that. Like
Yeah.
before Zoe moved in with me, for 100% of the time, there was this one instance, Phyllis, I came in there, picked Zoe up, and Zoe was all upset. She thought I was going to give her back because she was talking in class to the point that Rabel, her aunt, had to call her outside into the hall, right? And this was really serious in grade 6. And so she was upset. I was going to be upset. And that was going to be it, right? And then that night, I get a call from Rabel, who's upset, right? And she said, well, I don't know what to do because, she was talking and I had to, like, what should I do? And all this. And I said, well, it seems to me that you both had expectations. You had an expectation that now that she's your niece, she might be up there as a star art student, listening to you and doing all that. Zoe probably had this idea, you're her aunt and you're going to let her get away with anything. So I said, you both had high expectations and you were both sorely disappointed.
That's right.
And
How
she
dare her
said, well,
not let me talk.
yeah, and she said, what am I supposed to do? I said, you treat her like any other kid. She's
And
talking.
she did.
So it is challenging. You don't know, right?
Yeah.
So I give it to the belt for working through all of that.
Yeah, she stuck by us.
yes, and that's exactly like what a fabulous point to end on tonight
Mhm.
is that you have to stick through the rough times, right? They're going to come, but use your support systems, bring those people in, and be an advocate. So on behalf of the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation, and on behalf of all pre-adoptive families that are looking at adopting older children, to the ones that have adopted older children, and to the ones that are giving them a permanent family, whether they're adopted or not, right? You're giving them permanency. We need families that are willing and able to adopt older children. So thank you so very much, Marianne. I love watching you and Zoe interact. There is no doubt about the amount of love and respect that you both have for one another. And Zoe, you've always brought it. It's the only way I can feel is that, or say what I feel, is to say you cover it. Like you've lived it and you come out the other end and you're still an advocate for our children in care and you're working in this system. And I truly think you're a remarkable person. So you guys make the perfect match. And this was an adoption love story. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you,
you.
everyone. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
night.
Thank you.